Hello to everyone. My name is Emma Taylor, and I'm the founder and managing director of Chief Disruptor. Thank you for joining us at this Chief Disruptor Forum, evaluating the AI, cyber and risk landscape in partnership with Tanium. This is the latest in a series of lively, insightful and interactive virtual sessions that have been designed to connect industry leaders, practitioners and thought leaders, tackling the very latest and need-to-know disruptive trends, adoption strategies, use cases, and tools. For those of you who are perhaps joining us for the first time, Chief Disruptor is the community for disruptive business and technology leaders. Our purpose is to cut through the hype and enable our members to leverage these disruptive trends and technologies through our member-led insight reports, content, and community activities. If you're not already a member, please scan the QR code on the screen. Today, we are joined by Harman, Vice President for AI at Tanium, Andrew, a seasoned FTSE 100 enterprise risk practitioner with a strong technology focus, and Bogdan, the Senior Technical Lead, Engineering and Automation at Direct Line Insurance Group, who will be discussing how AI developments are rapidly reshaping the cyber and risk landscape, impacting both defensive and threat capabilities. This session is about interactivity, so we encourage you to ask as many questions as you would like. Before we begin the session, we'd love to hear your thoughts on our next poll, which we'll be sharing in our next Chief Disruptor Insights. This is our monthly newsletter, packed with member insights and takeaways, as well as thought leadership pieces. We'll be looking at which of the following cybersecurity threats pose the greatest threat to your organization. And you'll see that on the screen now. Just to highlight, your answer will be anonymous. So without further ado, let's deep dive into today's forum. If you'd like to pose any questions throughout today's forum, please use the Q&A function and we'll answer as many questions as we can. I'd like to welcome Harman, Bogdan and Andrew to our forum. Thank you all for joining us. By way of introduction, please could you share a brief introduction of yourself and your role or roles to date. So let's get stuck in. Today, we're going to be discussing the implications of significant change and growth in the cybersecurity landscape, driven by escalating online cyber threats and the increasing complexity of digital business ecosystems. There are a number of trends driving this, and we are going to go through some of these today, but not least of which there are a number of trends driving this, and we're going to get into those today, but not least of which is the integration of AI and machine learning into cybersecurity solutions, but also what has been described as the dual-edged sword of Gen AI, which can increase the threat of more sophisticated attacks. In the past, state-sponsored hacking groups from Russia, China, and other adversaries have been caught using AI to better attack their targets, for example, in the recent attack on the NHS. So what are the latest AI-related cybersecurity threats, and what are the wider trends that are influencing how organizations are being affected by cybersecurity threats? I'd like to welcome Harman, Bogdan and Andrew to this morning's forum, and also to thank you all for joining us. By way of introduction, please could you share a quick introduction of yourselves and of your roles to date. So coming to Harman first, please do introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Emma. So my name is Harman Kaur. I lead all things automation and AI at Tanium. And then before kind of joining the tech sector, I've spent about also a little bit over a decade in our US Air Force.
Thank you so much. Coming next to Andrew. Andrew, please, an introduction.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am a financial services professional, 30 years in the banking and insurance marketplace, working globally in Europe, the USA, and Asia Pacific. And I very much present an industry view, most recently as the Chief Risk Officer of Royal & Sun Alliance, a FTSE 100 insurer.
Thank you so much indeed. Bogdan, and to you, please.
I'm Bogdan, technologist by formation, corporate world the whole life. Been in a few blue chip companies, as I typically called Apple, M&S, eBay, now Direct Line Insurance Group. In AI, I've been involved with automation for about 35 years in different domains, and with AI more closely since 2018, when I designed and built the first commercial grade NLP platform in EMEA at MNS. Call MNS, you're gonna hear what I built. That's for customer services. And recently, I'm with Direct Line Insurance Group for the replatforming of their contact center, where they handle things like policies across the whole group of companies that Direct Line represents.
Thank you, Bogdan, very much indeed. So let's get stuck in. Today, we're going to be discussing the implications of significant change and growth in the cybersecurity landscape. This is driven by escalating online cyber threats and the increasing complexity of digital business ecosystems. There are a number of trends driving this, and we're going to get into those today, but not least of which is the integration of AI and machine learning into cybersecurity solutions, but also what has been described as a dual-edged sword of Gen AI, which can increase the threat of more sophisticated attacks. In the past year, state-sponsored hacking groups from Russia, China, and other adversaries have been caught using AI to better attack their targets, for example, in the recent attack on the NHS. For all of you with us today as panelists, what are the latest AI-related security and cybersecurity threats that you're seeing? But also, what are the wider trends that are influencing how organizations are being affected by cybersecurity threats? Andrew, can I come to you? I know we talked for this about the implication and indeed the impact of globalization.
Indeed, and as a chief risk officer working in industry and as a consultant, I've seen multiple instances where organizations, particularly with multiple systems, multiple platforms in different countries and continents, have been impacted in a way that they just did not anticipate, the so-called black swan events. And perhaps most recently, the Microsoft and CrowdStrike incident, which happened back in July, I think it was the 19th of July, which took out a lot of organizations globally who were on Microsoft platforms. Mac and Linux users weren't impacted. That impacted us here in the UK, airlines and train companies. John Lewis was unable to process payments for approximately 4 hours that particular morning. Over in the US, the big three airlines, American, Delta and United, were all significantly impacted. I think Delta alone cancelled 7,000 flights over 5 days. In their SEC filing, the CEO, Ed Bastian, has talked about an impact on 1.3 million customers and a cost to their organization of 500 million. I'm not sure who's writing the check on that one. I dare say the lawyers will do very nicely out of it. But it's just one example of where the global interconnectivity and the Internet of Things and systems being very highly dependent. There was a flawed update from CrowdStrike, Microsoft's security provider. The irony there is, of course, too profound. But it's one of the things that troubles me greatly as a practitioner and as chief risk officer with oversight of technology risk, just the impact to our systems now, given we are so dependent on it. Back to you.
Absolutely. And I think, as you'd said, that interconnectivity and dependence is just getting more and more intertwined, and the fallout is far more significant. I think some really important stats and facts there, and significant numbers commercially as well. Bogdan, can I come to you? I know you talked about the expansion and integration of generative AI and the impacts there. Can I come to you for your thoughts?
I think I'm going to come from a different angle, which is the human viewpoint, which is the loss of agency for people, since there is no vision for generative AI, like no vision at all. There isn't any. Terraforming Mars is not really a vision, is it? And that anyway goes beyond generative AI. Safe super intelligence. That's not a vision, but these are dreams. It's not vision. The problem is that the hypering pushes people that don't really understand much about what a large language model is, apart from what they've been fed, spoon-fed through various methods, which is not about what they actually are. And that means, just do it, automate everything. We automate it for you, so we do the hard work so you don't have to. But not doing the work means losing agency. You're just not gonna know how to do things anymore, because if you don't do them, you forget them. It's natural, like a Wall-E type of movie. That's actually very serious. We've seen that in the poor quality of software over the last 25, 30 years. Software today is not better than in the 60s. It's actually worse quality-wise. And that's mainly because of lost agency of people and too much automation, where it's not the case to automate that much, or not in the way it was automated. Point in case is that's no AI involved there in the early 2000s. Let's run automated marketing campaigns because we can reach out to 100 times more people in a week. Yes, you do, but the engagement sinks. So what's the point? No point. Better do them manually and keep the engagement at those levels than automate them all in ways that you don't actually understand what it means, and lose half of, or actually more than half of that engagement. But hey, I'm bombarding you with, I'm so productive. We are not more productive compared to, say, early 90s. Facts are quite stern, even with all the web development and all the automation put in place. Now, put AI in the middle of it, and particularly generative AI, with all the legal problems, with all the mass lawsuits, and more to come, with general strikes by artists, with, well, frankly, people dying in automated cars. People dying in automated cars, those are not accidents. It's not because they texted someone and they didn't pay attention or they were drunk. No, it was just in cars that were not fit for the road. Let's face it, that's a reality of it all. So yeah, automation done well is good, but that's not the case of LLMs right now, for example, or DALL-Es or anything generative. That's not the case. So the danger is that people forget to do existential things. Live, essentially, that's what it is. If you automate in the wrong way, losing agency, because work means exercising agency. You don't work, you don't have agency. That's it. So, and that's all because automation is not part of the national curriculum, for example. Technology evolved and changed so fast that the changes could not be absorbed by businesses, by society, and so on. And what that means, it means, well, what about, how about we use an LLM to translate and to summarize all the technical documentation?
Yeah,
So
and
we
it's
don't
something
have to
Bogdan, you
think
talked
too
about
much.
on the call, wasn't it? What can we do to break them? And I think that's something we're going to come on to, isn't it, during the session, is actually we're not in the right place yet.
But that's a security risk right there. That's a security risk right there. And that's one of the causes why the so-called, well, we all of a sudden we were hacked by the SVR. Well, you should have expecting that for at least 5 years. It should not be surprising, but it is surprising because of the lost agency. That's why.
Thank you, Bogdan, very much indeed. Harman, I'm going to come to you just sort of bit to build on that. I know we talked about your concerns for data privacy and jurisdiction. Can you come in now at this point, sort of share some of those thoughts with us and sort of talk about that sort of greater scale of resources that we need when it comes to defensive capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, just to extend a little bit what Bogdan was saying in terms of people have always been kind of a huge source of a threat for organizations. Like if you think of something really simple as like phishing emails, right? Like that's where a lot of cyber attacks initiate and start from. And what AI has now kind of enabled us to do is do that even better and even a lot cheaper. Like every sort of phase of that can be really amplified, and it can, even crafting the email and a simple LLM, ChatGPT can do that for you now. Sending that email, how do you want to target that email? it's a simple prompt into one of these, pick your AI, whatever of choice, and saying, I want to send an email that looks like this, and it drafts it. And then even getting the feedback and saying, I only had a 10% success rate and I want to increase my success rate, help me do that. You can get AI to help you do that. So whatever the threats that have existed, they have been amplified. And then same thing on the opportunity side, the opportunities that we've had and the tools that we've had to combat these things, we can also, and we need to employ them to make sure that we're protecting ourselves on the other side as well.
Thank you, Harman, very much indeed. I think a key concern for a number of Chief Disruptor members is how are nation states weaponizing Gen AI? We talked about it a little bit in the introduction. I think for a number of those members, we really need to sort of drill into that a little bit today on this forum. Harman, can I come to you? How are those nation states really sort of taking us to a new level?
Yeah. I think a lot of that is rooted in misinformation, especially here in the US. We're about to go through an election year, and it's, I think everyone at this point can agree, it is a pretty contentious election year for us. And so what has that allowed people to do, and what has AI given them a platform and an opportunity to do, is obviously amplify whatever side and whatever agenda they want to have. So that's a really big way that it's being used, and no one can really differentiate. People don't understand whether this is something that was generated by a human and it's been validated, or if this is something that someone just simply typed in a prompt into ChatGPT and made it look very real and published online, right? Like just a couple weeks ago, there was pictures of former President Trump going around, and it prompted a huge kind of conversation of, is that real? Where is the source of this information? So that's a really big way that especially for us right now and what we're living through, how it's being used.
Thank you, Harman, very much indeed. We've recently read in the AI Safety Institute report, every single LLM can be broken. Should we be concerned? So Bogdan, sort of coming back to some of the points that you were talking about there, that sense that generative AI cannot be secured due to the architecture. What did you mean when you said that? Sort of building on what you've said earlier, should we consider this technology as in beta at this point?
Well, they cannot be ring-fenced, and most of them run on public clouds one way or another. Either they're completely hosted there, or they have to engage with public clouds, otherwise they can't function, because that's the solution. And the moment we pronounce the word public clouds, it means no security parameter, definable security parameter, that is. Simply because the way data travels in 2022, I'm quoting Meta at that time, on 2021, Facebook engineers, that they stated they cannot know where the data ends up on the Facebook platform. Not that that is difficult to know. They cannot know. Okay. Add AI models onto that, which of course they need to, because otherwise it's unmanageable for sure. Well, by the way, that's not a bad use case of AI. It's just the sheer complexity I'm talking about here, which makes it unsecurable. Unsecurable to certain standards. I mean, not zero security, of course not. There is security around for sure. But we're talking state actors, and we're talking national security, and we're talking all these very, very serious matters. From that perspective, it's unsecurable. I don't believe so. There's no indication that it can even be secured. Also, we talk about that, right? I talk about that at the Army National Security and Defense Conference in February, about the four unsolved vulnerabilities of AI models. This is not just LLMs, which is, one is model collapse. That's a negative. Model collapse, by the way, is when models are fed machine generating data that is grasped from the internet and so on. And they keep being fed that, and then eventually, but pretty quickly, they will derail. They will just completely collapse. Okay, that is one. capability overhang, which is the development or all of a sudden you have capabilities that nobody could think of beforehand. Nobody, developers, nobody. That could be positive, that could be negative. The fact is in an unknown. You don't know what you get eventually. Again, this is not the rule of thumb, is going to happen at tremendous pace. But that's a problem because we don't know. We don't know if you end up with a Godzilla's type of capability, or I don't know, something that enables us to terraforming Mars in a positive way. Model poisoning, this is even before AI. Model poisoning, we know in SQL injection and so on, but this is particularly by poisoning a very small percentage of the training data. When I talk very small, it's less than 0.1%, less than 1 in 1,000 bytes. That has a tremendous effect if the attacker know what to poison. Of course, it's not done blindly, on the whole model. So it can be skewed to behave in different ways, in certain ways. Okay, this is also unsolved. And of course, prompt injection, which again, it's old method, where through certain prompts, and we've seen with ChatGPT, from like what, 2 weeks since going live, you had DAN do anything now on Reddit. Now there's probably version 200 of that. They were patched pretty quickly by OpenAI, next day others, all through prompting, manipulating the model to reveal the guardrails so they can be bypassed. You know, things like making a bomb and things like that, where kind of find information. These are not, these are real cases I'm talking about. They can be bypassed. So that's a serious matter. Apart from the so-called hallucination and all, but I'm talking purely about documented security vulnerabilities. These are unsolved. Should not they be looked at from a more serious viewpoint, not just from a technical viewpoint? Because this is not just technical. Prompt injection, it's mostly done with LLMs by non-technical people as well. Don't have to be an engineer to do that. In fact, most people are not engineers that use that method right now. Could change. So yeah, completely different strategy has to be used to address it.
Thank you, Bogdan, very much indeed. I'd like to look more deeply into data. So given that you are giving up your data, your information, your intellectual property, reputation, how should you go about doing Gen AI safely? Are we looking at prototype models? Are we looking at safe experimentation, synthesized data? Where do we need to go on that journey? Can I go to you, Harman, please, first, and then I'm going to come to Andrew.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really interesting question, and it's a question even from our side as we've been developing tools with AI and obviously making them available for different organizations to leverage in how much of their data do we want to use and how do we want to use it, and obviously being transparent about them and what data that we're actually using. And what we're realizing, there's a balance in that conversation, and that balance is somewhere between what is the value you're going to be getting. If anything is going to leverage your data, it's going to utilize your data. Is it actually much more valuable for you to have whatever this tool is going to provide to you and trading your data for it? And that is a hard decision to make right now, because frankly, most people don't know what value and what productivity increases AI tools will bring. So there is a little bit of a level of experimentation there. And I think it starts a little bit small. So I think it starts small and first understanding what data do you have available to you today that may not be as high value as other data that you can leverage and start to introduce some level of AI in your organization. And then from there, it's about kind of that scale mechanism and saying, okay, maybe if I also provide this context, it can help me get to this place. I think a lot of people think it's all or nothing, that you have to give AI models all of your data to get any value utilizing anything around AI, which isn't true. I think you can really kind of be gradual and you can be very intentional about how you want to actually and what data you want to share.
Thank you, Harman, very much. Andrew, with all of your experience, particularly across financial services, insurance, can you give us a sense of, see, data, almost the sort of heartbeat, and obviously as customers, we need to ensure that we're really getting everything that we feel we need to have, it's protected and so on. Can we have a look at sort of from that particular sector, where are we going with Gen AI? How do we work with it safely?
To admit that thus far, I don't think the banking and insurance, indeed asset management and wealth sectors and financial services in general has really yet harnessed artificial intelligence in its truest and most sophisticated form. I do not think for one moment that chatbots, for example, that will help direct you to the right section of a website to provide you with information on how to change your address or how to change your policy or similar type activities is in any way artificial intelligence. It's just automated driven response software. I think more broadly, we referred earlier and Harman referred to the fact that a lot of risk and cyber incidents happen by dint of human beings, and their actions. And certainly my experience in banking and insurance is that something in the region of 75–80% of the actual risk incidents or operational losses that occur are often as a result of humans inadvertently sharing one client's data with somebody else, maybe cutting and pasting an email and not forgetting to change all the required information, or as Harman mentioned, clicking on inadvertently a bogus phishing scam type email, which may or may not have been generated artificially. Maybe one of the old Section 439 African Nigerian general ones, or it may be something a little bit more sophisticated today. And we've seen instances where people in the finance department have authorized and sent payments out, believing they were acting on instruction from a senior executive or CEO, when in fact it was a very cleverly constructed information. Unfortunately, these days, Emma, for you, there isn't much by way of your data that isn't publicly out there. Your date of birth, your postcode, financial information, such as credit card numbers, etc., etc. And we have to be super careful in what we disclose. And always using passwords which aren't just the simple secret 1, 2, 3, 4s, but something way more sophisticated. I certainly have 3 different levels of passwords and complexity, depending on whether I'm just talking to a retailer who wants to email a receipt or talking to a bank or financial services company. But no, it is the case that a large number of operational incidents are actually just human generated. It's very rare you get the black swan type events, but they tend to obviously be rarer, but of greater financial impact. But you do get a large number of low-level, smaller losses which occur in the settlement areas in banks, in the trading areas of investment firms, and that can be quite a significant worry. And of course, if you get too many of those, you then get regulatory intervention, the attention of, here in the UK, the PRA, the FCA, or the Information Commissioner. And Harman and Bogdan will know of probably more examples in that space than I do. But back to you.
Thank you very much indeed. And certainly on our call, you talked about that 80% of cybersecurity threats being attributed to humans, an absolutely huge number. Can I then come, Harman, to you just in terms of what are those instances typically looking like from what you're seeing on the ground across industries? I know that Andrew's kindly shared some of those in terms of what we're seeing when it comes to financial services. If you can give us a little bit more sense across industry, and also going to come to Bogdan for further thoughts, having had all the experience he's had both in FS and retail and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's similar sort of trends more broadly, what you're seeing in financial services. I think people have remained the biggest threat, and I think even with AI, they will continue to remain the biggest threat. Obviously we talked a little bit about the whole phishing thing. That continues to be a trend that we're seeing even more, and it's amplified a little bit more with AI tools and things like that. We're also seeing, Bogdan, you started talking a little bit about this, as people have a little kind of feeling like they can automate anything. AI can do all things, that it's more capable than it really is right now. There is, and I think people think AI really can do it all. But there is a limitation. There truly is a limitation right now. These models aren't perfect. They cannot, in fact, automate everything for you. And so we're starting to see people, they'll, ask, they'll ask and have a script written for them, and they'll just employ that script without vetting it, without doing those things, and thinking, well, if AI wrote it, it must be perfect. So I think we're seeing a little bit of like kind of a false reliance on AI for a lot of organizations, and that's also starting to present itself in some forms of risks.
Thank you so much, Bogdan. With all of those industries that you've worked in, where are those use cases? Where are the challenges, particularly from a human-centered challenge, that we should be considering and be aware of and trying to avoid?
The overwhelming noise, the unscientific claims promoted even by certain broadcasters and interviewers. So this is not a new trend, but this is very much amplified in the last, especially the last, just before ChatGPT, about 3 years, especially about 3 years. In 2016, Professor Geoff Hinton, considered one of the fathers of AI, whatever that means, I don't know. I mean, Turing never used the word AI, and he was anything but unimaginative. So he didn't use the word AI for good reasons, but let's say it holds water. In a forum, he stated that stop training radiologists now. That is 2016. It's all over YouTube. What's more disturbing is that he received standing ovations for that. So he says, stop training radiologists now because deep learning is gonna get better than any radiologist can be within 5 or maybe 10 years. Okay, it's been 8. There's more radiologists needed now than anywhere in the history. Okay, so standing ovation for this nonsense, coming from a professor, right? Okay. This is a serious issue number 1. Serious issue number 2 is Mira Murati, the CTO of OpenAI. She's of course smart. Nobody doubts about that, and capable, and anything but incompetent, right? Well, just about 3 months ago, in a Dartmouth interview, she stated that ChatGPT understands language. Complete nonsense and unscientific, of course, but that's what she stated. She also stated that ChatGPT will reach PhD level intelligence within 1 year, maybe 18 months. That's early 2026 tops. PhD level intelligence, again, whatever that means. I mean, for machines. Again, going back to Turing, does anyone even read Turing's works to understand them, or just to tick a box, I read Turing? I think that's where the bigger problem and driver is. How are you going to understand the attacks that you're going to face and the attack vectors that develop considerably and pretty fast if you don't understand the tools because you're being disinformed by this kind of nonsense that it's fed down to choking point to people relentlessly? That's the real problem right there. Because the moment people are educated and start not having guesses, but actually they understand enough about how things work, they want to understand the security posture. But until
again
then,
and
that's
again,
not possible.
Yeah, sorry, Bogdan, go for it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Education is one of the biggest, if not the biggest factor in all these security problems. And also the myths and the cults of, say, well, public cloud is super secure. Obviously, it has very good security, but let's just not overblown it. The latest huge hacks that happened in the last, let's say, 3 years, they are all in public cloud, in the SVR hack of Microsoft backend, that was through Office 365, an Outlook email address. That's public cloud right there. The supply chain attack of SolarWinds, Office 365 again. And by no way I'm criticizing Microsoft here. This is not a criticism to Microsoft. They have been abused, but it's public cloud. It's a public cloud paradigm. It makes you more vulnerable, pretty much, because of how data circulates in unforeseen ways. But we need to understand these things. How many people understand that thing? That's why I'm advocating for automation to be included in the national curriculum, because otherwise you're not going to produce good developers, good product owners, good security engineers. There's no way. This is not something that, you know, you just read in some newspaper and some articles, you do some training online and then you have it. No, it doesn't happen.
Thank you, Bogdan, very much indeed. I think we've covered an awful lot of points already, and I think we got a lot more that we want to cover. I've seen some of the questions coming in also into the Q&A, and we've now got a number of those that we want to come back to allow for time. I think one of the things that I think would be useful to do is just a very quick sort of 15-20-minute summary from each user and where we got to the observations that you've seen so far. So Andrew, let me come to you. I know we've got more questions we want to ask, but I know there are also questions coming in. So observations that you see so far at the halfway point on this.
Well, I think this is an area of emerging risk. You know, we're very early on in the journey of what is called AI, although AI has been around, and I have just recently, as a result of moving house, gone through all my sort of 25 university books from my first technology degree, and there's a book from 1986, some 38 years ago, entitled Expert Systems and Their Use in Artificial Intelligence. It is effectively an area which has grown up over many years, starting with some very, very early pattern recognition, adding on visual recognition, adding on the ability to parse data, text, take information from the web and internet, and produce what we know today as generative AI, whereby you can say, please write me a speech on the following topic in the style of this particular author. And there you go. The great danger, I think, is that people and organizations place too much reliance on AI, as we've seen instances in the past where organizations have made catastrophic, even terminal mistakes by over-relying on a particular system or area. So I think very much this is in the emerging risk category. As a chief risk officer, I always sort of take all my risks and I put them through the lens of PEST, which people may have heard of, or PESTLE indeed now, which is expanded. That's an acronym in terms of the different areas around technology, the social impacts, the economic impacts, the legal ones, and the emerging risks that might exist. And AI is very much in the technology T in PEST and PESTLE area, and we are going to see more risk incidents as a result directly of AI, as opposed to just the broader technology risks which have existed over time. That would be my leaving thought to everybody. This is not a done area. This is very much an emerging and growing area that we'll see over the next 4 or 5 years, maybe the next decade. It's going to be an area that organizations and people who have my job title need to focus on. Back to you, Emma.
And I think coming back, doing those quick sort of observations at the halfway point, I think that will naturally take us into the question after these quick observations, which is control. What are we doing in that? So, Harman, sort of quick observations, thoughts at the halfway point.
Sorry, having a hard time finding the mute button. No, I think, Andrew, I think you summarized it well, which is like, this is new, and there is right now a little bit of a split between, you know, AI can do it all versus don't want to touch AI. And I think you've got to really find something in the middle for your organization that makes most sense, because I don't think both of those approaches are right. You can't rely on AI and say we're going to put AI everywhere and make everything much more productive, but you also can't say we're not just going to do AI because it's going to replace jobs or it's a huge privacy risk for us. I think you've got to start exploring what it means to your organization.
Thank you, Harman, so much. Bogdan, just a quick thought from you before we go into that question all around control.
I don't have a thought about that. I think really my thoughts will be expressed by the question that are already in Q&A. Actually, if we look at them, and I looked at them.
And we'll come to them actually towards the end.
These are actually my thoughts right there. I mean, in the answers, but also in the questions for sure. You know, what comes next? That's a question everybody should ask, but seriously, not, you know, just like a dream. Seriously, because that's how serious hack happens. Because you know, know, not enough people think about what might come next.
Yeah.
For
The
example,
what if and the now
yes,
what.
this is one. And you know, coming back to this overwhelming noise of, you know, lies, misinformation, disinformation, you know, half-truth, Wikipedia quotations all the time on serious matter and serious arguments, you know, really, really bad practice, but it does happen. That's your attack surface right there. This overwhelming noise is the attack surface right there, because the scope of a lie, I just read Hannah Arendt recently, the scope of a lie is not to lie, is to make truth undistinguishable from non-truth. And so the aim is to get people not to know what to believe anymore, distrust everything. And we see how trust is being destroyed. Okay. And so once that happens, then those people can easily be, well, manipulating into pretty much anything, because they cannot distinguish between right and wrong anymore, since everything is untrustworthy, since the lie predominates. That's the scope of lies and disinformation. And I think from my perspective, that's the aim of these attacks through disinformation. Nobody can know what to believe anymore. And so they will believe what is easier to believe, which probably is a lie. So that's what I would see. That's where we have to look at more, rather than just the technicalities of it, but the scope of it all. And then the delivery methods, we see they've been, you know, automated at planetary scale. Somebody asked about, say, for example, AI for drones, which is, again, an attack vector, right? A physical one, nonetheless, a big one. The drones can be so cheap and can run devastations, right? But I prefer to give an answer on a positive, drones that don't kill people, but actually drones that help identifying war crimes and putting war criminals into the dock. That's being done since about 2018, 19, where drones go into, you know, war zones and detect, identify the use of banned ordnance, like, say, white phosphorus. And so by doing that, they know, okay, this is war crimes have been committed, international law had been broken, and so on. That's computer vision involved, as well as, you know, deep learning deployed on fairly small drones. So it's quite an achievement. So that's a positive, right? For example, identifying those things, very important. Apart from the negatives, which we know what war is about, killing and maiming. But that's what I would say, to think of how to cut through this absurd noise that's around us, and how to make it, well, reduced, if not stopped. All this nonsense flying around even from some of the prominent people. Hopefully majority don't play a part on it, but still. And the airtime given by certain media outlets to all that nonsense. Why they are not held to account? This is not entertaining anymore.
Yeah. Harman, may I come to you just briefly, just to briefly talk about the drones, then I'm going to move us actually on to control, because I think, you know, we talked a lot about some pretty terrifying areas, risks, threats, really, that were at the beginning of this journey in some ways. Just sort of finishing that conversation on the drone aspect, what have you been seeing?
I think so. If you look at the strengths of what AI presents, right, it can process a lot of data, it can help you with a lot of data correlation, and then obviously for that, there you can use that to make a lot more quicker decisions. So if you kind of look at that loop, and that fits really well into what you need for drone technology and for you to kind of scale those missions. So that's where that opportunity has really presented itself, is what do drones inherently use and what do they do a lot of, which is like collect a lot of data. That data can be then processed and correlated really quickly, and that decision making becomes much more efficient. So I think in those sort of use cases, you're basically taking all the strengths that AI has and all the models today have, and really packaging them up for something that requires all of those things. So that's where I think the biggest opportunity has presented itself in the whole drone world.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's go on then to how can you control how can you gain control, but also what is out of your control? I know, Andrew, from our earlier call, that you see this as a matter of sort of operational resilience, you to break standard into two kinds of threats. Can you bring that to life a little bit more for us, allowing for a little bit of time as we head towards the end into answering some of those questions that are in the Q&A, and also to make sure that we have a good roundup. So thoughts on control and out of control.
Yeah, so I mean, highlighting that all of the events happen as a result of human beings, in terms of people risk, in terms of technology risk, and in terms of enterprise risk management, there are a number of things. A lot of CTOs and the technology functions in large organizations will shut down the possibility of inbound emails or sending external emails. They will also block the use of certain internet websites, not only so staff are not idle at their desks checking the cricket score in the test match or similar, or the US Open tennis for that matter at the moment, very topical, but also blocking sites which might potentially lead to harmful interactions or potential infiltration of malicious code. Bogdan referred to the injection of SQL and other such strings into fields on web forms, etc., which quite often customers will have to complete, and that can cause a lot of damage. So in terms of exercising control, that can happen. Block the use of the generative AI sites which have come up to date. If people want to do that kind of thing, let's do it at home, not on company systems. So there is an element of risk mitigation and control you can introduce. Can you shut down everything? No, you can't. You never can. But you can certainly shut down the known risks, the known knowns. Of course, the infamous unknown unknowns and unknown knowns are always there and will potentially creep forward as organizations shut down the known ones. But control from a risk perspective is what it's all about. And dealing with the known risks is certainly, the best step that you can do, but keeping very, very alert to what's going on externally.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'm just going to come to Harman just very quickly to see if you've got any quick points on that, and then I'm going to take us actually all on to looking at sort of detection, prevention of attacks and detection. So anything from your perspective, Harman, on that particular point of that control and lack of control?
No, I think, you covered that well there. Like, I think the conversation, all of it really starts coming down to calculated risks here. Like everything we're saying, I think you have the perfect title, Andrew, with Chief Risk Officer, and the perspective you're providing. So I think it all just kind of comes down to that.
Thank you very much. Let's, in the interest of time, move on to AI and how it can help organizations detect and prevent those cyber attacks and detection, and how that's becoming more sophisticated every day. In principle, how can enterprises use AI tools to detect, analyze, and respond more proactively to cybersecurity threats? Bogdan, I'm going to come to you first, and we're going to just probably spend just a couple of minutes on this point. Thanks, Bogdan. Over to you.
Again, it's tied when it comes to anything to do with mitigation. More control is better than less control. Total control not possible, I don't think should be the aim anyway. But understanding what cannot be controlled, what can be controlled, and is it really controlled? It can be, but is it controlled? And Tony Stanford has asked a question: to what extent the risk is mitigated by hosting your stuff, not public clouds, but on your private cloud, your on-premise, and so on. Well, to a great extent. If, of course, it's not just deployed on premise, on private cloud, just in name, and then still the necessary control are not really working well. In that case, you're better off on the public cloud, of course. But if it's done correctly, then of course, because first of all, you know who is a data processor and data controller is. You don't know on the public cloud where large language models, copilots, and things like that, or even other forms of AI are present. Why? Because if we look at, let's say, Microsoft terms of service, they say that the data you use with their products, i.e. Microsoft Office, for example, Teams, and so on, they're going to use it in training their models. So, so they are data controllers. They are not just data processors, but you're also data controller. And you also have customer data in using those Office products. So for your customers, you are the data controller, but which is more important, without your customers knowing, their data is also controlled by Microsoft, but could be other entities, OpenAI, and so on. That's the limit. Obviously, that's quite a huge issue. Also in terms of security, because what that means, it means that if Microsoft is hacked in a major way, your customers are hacked in that major way. Okay, it propagates like a virus. Propagates like a virus. If that's on premise, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen because you're not gonna use Microsoft Office 365. If you do that, then you're on the public cloud, so you're not on premise that much anymore. You know, and there's a much clearer delimitation if you to who controls what. And if it's a much clearer delimitation, it's a much lower risk. Obviously, right? Also, even logs. Nobody thinks about logs that much. But logs are like sometimes like your garbage. Good detectives always look through garbage at a crime scene because there's a lot of information in garbage now that is usually forgotten about. That's your logs right there. So treat your logs as your most important data on the same level. Now, if you're on a public cloud, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Even if you're on IaaS, you say, well, but it's only the bare metal and the processor and everything else, it belongs to us. Well, no, it doesn't. It belongs to those who run the hardware. There's a host of information that you're just not going to have access to at the operating system level. So yes, it does mitigate a great deal, but of course you have to operate in a certain way. It just doesn't come by default. You just put it on premise and you're more secure. Not really. Yes. So to answer Tony's question, which again, it is one of the fundamental questions. How can we control more so that we reduce risk in meaningful ways?
Thank you. Harman, I'm going to come to you just for some quick thoughts on that, and then we're just going to have a look at those questions that come in and also just wrap up by looking at what are those key takeaways and what are those sort of top tips that each and every member should be thinking about. So just coming back to that point, just get your thoughts. So in principle, how can enterprises use AI tools to detect, analyze, and respond more proactively to cybersecurity threats?
Yeah, I think, what's interesting is my answer to that question hasn't changed much in the last couple of years. And the reason I say that is because the emphasis on cyber hygiene has really, really gone up for me, which is sure, yes, there's a lot more threats out there, but those threats have existed before AI. So that means you've got to get the fundamentals right now. So something as simple as patching, like Bogdan, you're talking about, people are looking through your garbage. People are looking at if you're not patched. It's not the coolest thing to say when you come to cybersecurity, but that's kind of where people get in. Same thing with people, like phishing emails. There's all these sophisticated attacks that we read about, and we're reading the details, how they got in there. But if you really distill it down, the entry points of these things aren't cool. They're not something super glamorous or something super sophisticated. So I think what it's come down to is now there's a realization that fundamentals and the foundations of security are really cyber hygiene, and we've got to get that right. And I don't think organizations are getting more people to help them do that. So where you can leverage AI is help you actually maybe automate some of these processes, some of these more simple processes. And then when you do have a threat, when you are responding to something, AI does present a huge opportunity to help you sort of expedite the data collection piece, analyzing that data. Sure, right? We're still in a place where I think it's important and it's critical to have a human in that loop, when you're actually making a decision in terms of how you want to remediate that threat. But in terms of exploring that threat, in terms of understanding the scope of that threat, you can for sure leverage. There's, if you look at Microsoft Copilot, you can, tell Copilot and say, hey, help me understand what is this script doing that I found on an endpoint? Is this anything malicious where someone may have spent a couple hours their entire day looking through? And now Copilot can at least give you an indication. It's like, yeah, maybe this is what this is doing. So I think you can use these tools to your advantage to help you expedite that process. But it all really comes back to the foundations, which is you've got to get the fundamentals right. You've got to know where all of your assets are. You've got to make sure they're actually managed. So you're able to.
So much. Andrew, quick thoughts on that before we start to sort of look at those questions and wrap up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just endorse what's already been said from a risk officer's perspective, knowing that your chief technology officer and technology function have metaphorically got all of the doors firmly shut with, 6-point mortise locks, to use the metaphor, that you've got up-to-date versions, that organizations aren't running out of date, unpatched, systems, and versions of external software that aren't fully up to date with all the required security, doing the endpoint detection, ensuring that you're screening out phishing emails, external emails which are malicious. There are more and more sophisticated packages, but you still need the involvement of the human being, as Harman has just said. Bogdan's comment about, stop training radiologists. Well, the radiologist still has to train the AI system what to look out for when, looking at that mammogram or looking at that particular X-ray of a tumor. You still need the human involvement here because everything continues to move forward. I'm not going to say too much more, Emma, because I'm conscious we've got some great questions from participants. And if anyone wants to add a question in, please do so now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. So there have been a number of questions that have come in, and you as panelists have very kindly brought some of your answers to those questions actually into what you've been talking about so far, which has been fantastic. What I'd like to do is also, I know there's a question there, for example, from Chris, which I think is a really good deep dive question, which I think we can come to as well, which talks about the integration of AI and sort of looking at novel attack surfaces and so on. So that question that's come in, I think let's absolutely go to that. I think just in case we lose anyone on the hour because of officially filming it, that what I'm going to do first is just come to all of you really for that one tip that you would give each and every member to take away with when we've been looking at evaluating the AI, cyber and risk landscape. What we'll also do is just build on some of those questions. Absolutely going to come back to you as well when we do the post-event sharing of the recording. We'll also share some of those thoughts and findings from what the panelists can say after this session. But just in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is just ask each and every one of you to sort of come to us with your tip in terms of what should the audience be doing today? So Harman, let me come to you first. Thanks, Harman, very much indeed.
Say Bogdan or Harman? Sorry.
Sorry, to Harman. So that last key takeaway, where do we need to get to?
My biggest sort of key takeaway for will be ask the questions, which is inevitably you're going to have AI in your organizations show up, whether it's because you procured something directly or because the vendors that you're already employing are going to start introducing AI in your organization through their tools. It's inevitable that AI is going to be part of your organizations. So as early as possible that you can start asking questions, what are those things that are coming into your organization? Which vendors are starting to employ AI? And how are they starting to do that? And ask for a level of transparency And then I think that will start to open a lot of conversations in your organizations of areas that you've never thought about. Maybe there's data that you've never thought about required any sort of governance before. Then now that you need to figure out how do we actually govern and regulate this data. So that would be my biggest thing.
Thank you very much indeed. Bogdan, to you for your final key tip to the audience, please.
It's old school classic one, understand automation and understand what's happening to the data you are responsible for, which is not only your own data. It's also your customers' data and possibly your business partners' data in some cases. That's what I like to be,
Thank you very much.
away.
Andrew, to you.
Well, I'll comment in passing on the two questions from my namesake as well, Emma. Clearly someone who predates me, given they've said AI goes back to 1956. My textbook was 1986, 38 years ago, but they go back another 30 years, another generation. Although generations in computer languages were about every 5 to 6 years when I was at university, they're now sort of almost every 2-3 years. Bogdan just mentioned data, the use of data, your organization's data and your customers' data. It's probably the most valuable asset that an organization doesn't have on its balance sheet over and above its brand name. And, we've seen how leveraging data can really enhance an organization's delivery capability and position the market, and also cause considerable damage if you don't protect that data as it should be. I think my tip to everybody would be focus on the fundamentals of cybersecurity, the data perimeter in your organization, the technology perimeter. As Andrew has also commented, private and public cloud, well, there is a difference in the security levels, but I think the point that he's making in his second question at 154 is that actually when organizations outsource their technology management to third-party organizations, they quite often lose the internal knowledge and expertise of what's going on, and they therefore become totally beholden to that organization. But of course, if you outsource, you delegate the responsibility, but not the accountability. So if it does go wrong, you can be sure that the government bodies, regulators will come back to you, the organization who took that decision. So it's a critical area. It needs focused resources, and the comment there about having the right expertise is key. You need people on this area to manage the risk who know what they're doing. It's a rapidly moving, fast moving area. So with that, I'll hand back.
Thank you very much indeed. And always that challenge around the training, the education, the skill shortages and everything. It's a huge amount for everyone to be tackling. So a big thank you to all of you as our panelists today, to Harman, to Bogdan, to Andrew. Some incredible insights there. And I think we could have continued to talk for some time. It's an absolutely challenging environment for everyone to be in, ever evolving. And we've seen many, many cases now, sadly, of how important it is and how much risk we do all take on, both as individuals and within our teams and our organizations. Thank you very much for some great questions as well. And I think sure there will be more. If you do have more, please do let us know, and we'll come back to you with some of those answers as quickly as we possibly can. We'll also be posting the recording from today's forum on chiefdisruptor.com. So please do look out for that. Also in our monthly newsletter, Chief Disruptor Insights, and on our YouTube channel. So please do take a look at that when it's live tomorrow, but also please feel free to share that. I think it'll be incredibly useful for your colleagues, your peers, and others within your organization. Our next Chief Disruptor Forum is Enabling Ethical AI, which will be taking place on the 23rd of October at the same time. We'd love you and your colleagues to join us. Again, please go to chiefdisruptor.com and you can register there for this and any of our future activities that are available both to our full members and to our associate members. So big thank you once again, a really, really key topic, absolutely fundamental to the success of any of the AI or Gen AI projects that you'll be taking on. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. But in the meantime, please do stay safe.